Hey guys, Bernal Sabrin. Welcome to the first edition of Field Talk Fridays. So this is a series that we're going to be running all summer and beyond, depending on how much interaction we get back from you guys. Basically, every Friday we are going to answer your agronomy related questions. So if you've got questions, make sure to leave a comment below. This week's question probably stems from the presentation that I gave at Manitoba Ag Days this year. If you haven't caught it, you can head on over to their YouTube channel. We'll put the link in the description. But it's centered a lot around profitability and using data to make better decisions on the farm. But one of the question was whether you need good agronomy more in a year where margins are tight or in a year where there's lots of money to be made. And of course, we made the argument for both. It's all about profitability and sustainability. In the good years, you got to make hay while the sun shines, and in the poor years, that's where you might ratchet back and be more conservative, but you want to make sure that you're not spending any extra money, but at the same time not leaving yield out on the field. So the question of the week this week is, what percentage of gross revenue should we be allocating to fertilizer? So if you were to do some searches on Google, generally most crops, that number is going to be around 20 to 30%, with the exception of a crop like soybeans that fixes its own nitrogen, which would be more to 10 to 20%. If we look a little bit closer to home, the Manitoba 2025 Crop Production Guide put out by Manitoba Agriculture is an excellent resource giving budgeting or crop budget ideas on which crops might be more profitable this year. They do a really in-depth analysis, and the numbers that they came up with for 2025 were 20% again for most crops, canola, corn, wheat, and 10% for a crop like soybeans, again, because it doesn't use as much nitrogen. So now if we dive it into even closer to home and look at the Red River Valley, we looked at our own Insights benchmarking numbers where we do this analysis for our customers. And in our analysis, what we were finding was that most crops varied from 16 to 21% in 2024. So part of that reason is that we had record yields that overshot what we had fertilized for. So we had ample moisture, lots of heat units, so we had lots of microbial activity and breakdown to supply those plants with nutrients. So we're a little bit lower than what the average might be. Now, when we look at soybeans and the numbers that I had, we were as low as 3%. Now, this is for a variety of reasons. One of the main ones being is that soybeans don't typically respond to nitrogen or to phosphate fertilizer, so guys will forego putting any on. The other reason is we've got ample potassium in the soil here, so very rarely will we add potash, never mind a crop like soybeans. So when we look at our numbers, there was only 42% of farmers that actually put anything on, and even of that, probably half of it was just a starter trickle down 20 pounds in the furrow, where we seem to get a response. We've got very heavy clay soils, high pH, our phosphate is tied up big time. We actually do in some cases get a response to a little bit of phosphate placed in the furrow. So a bit of a tip for you guys. So there are a number of other factors, like I mentioned, that are going to come in to affect these numbers. Number one is, what are your soil residual levels? So we've got heavy clay soils that hold a lot of nutrients. But other areas are not so fortunate, especially there's a lot of areas, sandier soils don't hold nutrients, you need more potash, etc., etc. Another thing that might affect the numbers is if there's a history of manure or other biological sources of fertilizer. It'll depend if you've got a build or a sustain approach. And then also, there's the age-old question, are you going to spend extra money on land that you may not farm next year, rented land, or if you're close to retirement, so on and so forth. So there's a host of other factors that goes into coming up with these numbers, but I would say that 20% is probably a good rule of thumb to use for most crops, 10% for soybeans, or even less. There are other practices that we can do that improve fertilizer efficiency. So number one, first and foremost, the easiest one that you can do is to soil test your fields. Soil test gives you an idea of what's there for residual and tells you how much extra you're going to add to achieve your goals. There's other things that you can do. You can cut back where you can if you've been aggressive on fertilizers or you've got very healthy soil residual levels. There are certain nutrients that we can tend to cut back on a little bit. You can find this out perfect idea thing is I mentioned our Insights benchmarking group. There you can gauge yourself against other similar operations in a similar geography to see what they're doing. Are you under fertilizing? Are you over fertilizing? Is there an opportunity to do things better? The third one that I want to touch on is variable rate nutrients. It may just be, oftentimes we're just reallocating those nutrients in the field. So you will have ridges that tend to dry up. If you've always fertilized them the same as the rest of the field, well, there's a buildup of fertilizer in those areas. Conversely, in the depression areas that may drown out, same idea. We've got an excess of nutrients there because the crop just hasn't been pulling it out. But often it's those mid slopes where we get very high yielding, but they don't have that natural fertility or that fertilizer buildup. Those are the areas that we can push a little bit harder. So if we can reallocate more nutrients to those areas, we should be able to do better with the nutrients that we have. Another example is sulfur, which moves with water. We've got ample sulfur in the depressions, but we've probably got deficiencies on the knolls. So that might be another case for variable rate. When the margins are tight and the dollars that we're playing with now and what it takes to put in a crop, we should probably do revisit a lot more this idea of variable rate and only putting nutrients where we may need them. Maybe there's only 20 or 30% of the field that needs a sulfur application. So these are all different things that you can do. Lastly, probably enhanced efficiency fertilizers. If we can reduce or minimize our losses to the environment. In our heavy clay soils, leaching isn't really a problem, but denitrification is when we're talking nitrogen. So these are a lot of different things that we can do to improve nitrogen efficiency. I hope I've answered your questions. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. Check out the rest of our socials, and we'll see you next week.